Why was everyone ignoring her at the briefing table? They spoke in clipped voices, maps spread like arteries of a wounded world, but not once did their eyes meet hers. Maybe they didn't mean to. Maybe they thought silence was neutral, but silence has edges, and tonight it was cutting her from the inside out. Rain ticked against the corrugated roof. The smell of metal and oil hung in the air, sharp and sterile. Outside, somewhere beyond the razor wire, a dog barked into the blackness, one of the ferals that prowled the perimeter. She kept her gaze fixed on the grainy satellite photo in front of her, the target marked with a trembling red dot. Her hands were steady, but her throat was. She had memorized everything already. The route in, the fallback positions, the exit corridors. What the others didn't know was that she hadn't slept in 2 days. What the others didn't know was that she had promised herself she would come back alive this time, not for glory, not even for the mission. For her sister. Someone cleared their throat. The major, leather-faced, gray around the temples, traced a finger along the river that curled like a scar through the valley. Ingress is 0300. Silence until confirmation. No second chances. The men nodded. A few smirked like it was sport. None looked at her. Her name was Lena. They knew that. They just chose not to say it out loud. Because Lena didn't fit here. Not really. Not in the way they measured things, with ranks, with kill counts, with the brittle jokes they told to keep death at arm's length. She had stopped trying to belong months ago, maybe years. Now she just existed between the beats of orders in the quiet spaces where no one bothered to look. The major snapped the folder shut. Chairs scraped. Boots thudded out of the tent like a low drumbeat fading into the distance. Lena stayed seated, staring at the map until it blurred. There was something she hadn't told them. Not yet. The night air outside was cold enough to bite. She walked past the floodlights, their harsh cones painting everything in stark whites and endless shadows, and made her way to the far edge of the compound where the generators hummed. She liked it here. The vibration through the soles of her boots drowned out her thoughts, or at least softened them until they felt like someone else. Her rifle waited on the bench, disassembled and clean. She picked up the bolt, the steel cool and familiar, and began piecing it back together with the kind of muscle memory that comes only from obsession. It was the only thing she trusted anymore: steel and glass, not people. People broke when you needed them most. As the pieces clicked into place, a memory rose without her permission. A kitchen light flickering above a cracked linoleum floor, her sister Emma's voice echoing from the hallway, too bright, too young. That had been 3 years ago. The night she'd left. The night she'd promised Emma she'd come back. She had smiled, but her chest had been hollow. She missed Emma's graduation, missed her first heartbreak, missed the hospital call when Emma went silent for weeks, and yet somehow she still believed she could fix it by surviving. She locked the bolt forward with a sharp snap. The sound was too loud in the dark. A figure stood behind her. Couldn't sleep either. It was Torres, wiry, eyes always half-lidded like he hadn't decided if he cared about living or not. He was one of the only ones who didn't flinch at her silence, maybe because he carried his own. "Didn't try," she said. He leaned against the bench, chewing something that wasn't there. "You know they talk about you." "I know. They say you don't crack, that you don't even blink when it gets bad." She glanced at him. "That's not true." He shrugged. "Maybe they just want to believe someone doesn't feel anything. Makes it easier." "Does it?" "No," he paused, "but it helps you pretend." A plane roared overhead, low and distant. They both watched its blinking lights vanish into the clouds. Neither spoke again, not for a while. Hours later, she sat alone in the gear bay, lacing her boots. The others were laughing in the next room, a hollow, metallic laughter like shells clattering across a floor. Her hands trembled once when she tied the final knot, then went still. Duty is strange. It doesn't ask if you're ready. It only waits to see if you move. She did. They filed into the hangar at 0257. No handshakes, no words. The helicopter crouched in the darkness like a steel animal, rotors sagging low. The smell of fuel stung her nose. Lena slid her pack on, slung her rifle, and climbed aboard without a glance at the others. The pilot flicked switches. The rotors groaned awake. Wind clawed through the hangar, tearing loose papers from the walls. Her heart matched the rhythm of the blades, steady, relentless, numbing everything else. She thought of Emma again. Emma in the doorway, trying not to cry the night Lena left. "You don't have to do this," Emma had said. Lena had smiled then, too, the practiced kind, the one that kept people from asking more questions. But she had to. Because Emma would never know the real reason Lena signed up. She hadn't even told herself the truth until it was too late. They lifted off. The world below melted into black. Rivers became scars of silver. Forests swelled like dark waves. Lena watched the earth slip away beneath her boots, her mind floating somewhere just above her body. The mission was simple on paper: infiltrate, extract, exfil. A local journalist had been taken hostage by a splinter group, high value, politically sensitive. No airstrikes, no mistakes. Lena was there as Overwatch. No one knew why Command had insisted on her specifically, and no one had asked. But Lena knew. Because 2 months ago, she had been there when their last Overwatch froze. When the man had hesitated, when his finger had stayed still on the trigger, and the team had paid for that hesitation in blood. She hadn't hesitated. And no one had looked at her the same since, not even herself. Clouds swallowed them whole. The helicopter rattled like a dying engine inside a gray void. Condensation streaked down the windows in trembling lines. Lena closed her eyes. She didn't pray, not anymore. But she counted Emma's name like beads on an invisible thread. Emma, Emma, Emma. It was the only thing that made sense. The voice in her headset crackled, 10 mics. She breathed once, twice, opened her eyes. Through the mist, the tree line emerged black and endless. A clearing waited beyond like a mouth carved out of the earth. She saw no movement, no light, only silence. The team jumped first, ropes hissing through gloved hands. Lena followed, her boots biting into mud. The smell of moss and gasoline hit her like a memory she couldn't place. The helicopter rose, shrinking into the fog until it was gone. Just like that, they were alone. They moved as shadows. No words, just gestures. She took the ridge line while the others hugged the low ground. Every step felt rehearsed and unreal, like walking inside a photograph that might tear if she breathed too hard. Her earpiece hissed once, then went silent. Something about that silence felt wrong, too still, too complete. And in that silence, she remembered something she had buried so deep she had thought it was gone. The night Emma had stopped answering her calls. A twig snapped below. Lena froze, breath caught like glass in her throat, scope raised. One silhouette, then another. Muffled voices in a language she only half understood, threading through the trees like smoke. They weren't supposed to be here. The map had said the patrols stopped 20 clicks east. The map was wrong. Her finger brushed the trigger, her heart beat once, twice. Then she saw it, a flash of something around one man's neck. A child's necklace, plastic beads. He was younger than she'd thought. 17, maybe, scared, trying not to look scared. His hands trembled as he adjusted the strap on his rifle. Lena's breath hitched. She could end him. She had before. But if she fired now, the whole mission would detonate. If she waited, he might see them. He looked up, eyes flicking across the ridge. And then he walked away. Just like that, gone, swallowed by the trees. She lowered her scope with hands she couldn't quite feel. Something hot and raw rose in her chest, relief maybe, or shame, she didn't know which. The team moved on, unaware of how close they'd come to dying. Or maybe they knew and just didn't care. She stayed behind a moment, staring into the dark, listening to her pulse crash in her ears. Then she whispered, not to anyone, maybe not even to herself. "I'm not like you." Dawn was still hours away when they reached the outpost, a crumbling stone structure clinging to the mountainside like something nature had tried to erase. The air thinned to knives. Their breath came in ghosted plumes. Lena crawled into position on a ridge overlooking the structure. The others crept toward the rear wall, black shapes melting into black rock. She settled the rifle against her shoulder, feeling the familiar weight anchor her back to earth. The hostage was somewhere inside, alive maybe, maybe not. Her finger rested on cold steel. And in that breathless stillness, she felt it for the first time since she left home. Not peace, but the faint echo of who she used to be, before duty hollowed her out, before fear became her shadow. Why was her heartbeat louder than the wind? Lena pressed her cheek to the cold stock, eyes fixed through the scope on the broken outpost below. Every gust pushed tiny streams of dust across the stone courtyard, whispering like ghosts between cracked pillars. The place felt ancient, like it had been waiting for something or someone to disturb its sleep. Movement flickered in a shattered window, just a shadow, but shadows meant life, and life meant noise, and noise meant risk. Her earpiece clicked once, Torres' voice barely a thread, in position. She breathed slow, steady, let her pulse bleed into the dirt. The others were ghosts now, crawling into the ruins' flanks like smoke through a dead house. She tracked them silently, the crosshairs gliding from one dark figure to the next as if tethered by invisible lines. This was her world, measured in angles, distances, breathing patterns, measured in the space between a trigger squeeze and silence. But her mind betrayed her. She saw Emma's face, sudden and unbidden. From the last photo she had sunlight on her cheek, the faded blue sweater she always wore when she missed their mom. Emma had been smiling, but her eyes had been tired. The kind of tired you don't talk about. Lena blinked hard. Not now. A light flared inside the structure, just a flash, then gone. Lena's stomach tightened. She switched magnification. The image snapped closer, harsh, fractured edges of stone walls, a metal door scarred with rust, and then an arm, thin, unsteady, shackled to the wall. The hostage. Alive. Her hand clenched before she could stop it. Breath caught halfway up her throat like barbed wire. She swallowed it down. Earpiece crackled. Torres again. Target located. South wing. Will breach in 60. 60 seconds. 60 chances for everything to fall apart. Lena whispered to herself, almost soundless, "Stay awake, stay here." She meant it as a command, to her body, to her thoughts, maybe to her past. Because part of her was still back home, sitting on the floor outside Emma's locked bedroom door, whispering the same words through the crack, "Stay, please, stay here." And Emma hadn't. The first explosion was small, just a shaped charge kissing the door off its hinges. It didn't echo, it thumped like a muffled heartbeat. Muzzle flashes blinked in the dark like fireflies. The team poured through the gap, shadows in perfect formation. Lena tracked them through her scope, every muscle locked. She picked off shapes before they could even fully emerge, controlled, silent, clinical, glass shattered. Stone screamed. Bodies dropped soundlessly, marionette strings cut. She didn't feel anything, not yet. Then someone screamed. Not the hostage. One of theirs. The sound punched through her chest like a fist. Down, he's down. Torres' voice cracked through her earpiece, frantic. Trap tripwire. The hallway erupted. Dust bloomed from the windows, thick and suffocating. Stone chunks clattered like teeth on the rocks below. Torres, Lena whispered, but it came out strangled. Status. Static. Then a ragged breath. He coughed. I'm good. Ramirez is hit bad. Her mouth went dry. Ramirez, the only one who had shown her pictures of his kids, who once confessed he wasn't scared of dying, just of being forgotten. She had promised herself she wouldn't care about any of them. Promises are lies you tell your heart to keep it from breaking too soon. Lena shifted. New angles, new threats. She saw 3 heat signatures converging on the team from the north corridor. Contact left, she hissed. 3 armed. Torres copy. Gunfire bloomed like lightning. Stone dust hazed the scope. One of the heat signatures flickered out. Another fell. The last turned, running. Lena's crosshair kissed the back of his neck. She breathed out. The world went still again. Inside, the shouting quieted. Minutes dragged. Then the radio cracked back to life. Package secure. Lena's eyes closed for just half a second. Relief surged like water over scorched ground and then drained away, leaving her empty. They had the hostage, alive, breathing, trembling maybe, but breathing. It should have felt like victory. It didn't. She scanned the area again, sweeping the ridgelines, the tree line, the horizon, everything still, too still. Her instincts hissed like static, not done, not done. She was right. The first mortar hit 50 meters behind her, flinging dirt into the air like a scream. Lena dropped flat, heart detonating against her ribs. The blast wave slapped her helmet, rattling her teeth. The air filled with shrieking metal, shrapnel clawing past her cheek in invisible lines. Contact indirect, she barked into comms already rolling behind a stone lip. North Ridge. Another round slammed into the far slope. The earth convulsed. Move, move, Torres shouted, his voice stretched thin by panic. Lena's hands moved without thought. She swung the scope, found the source, faint muzzle flash on the far ridge. 2 silhouettes working fast, shadows against lightning-scorched rock. Her world narrowed to a heartbeat. Wind distance, drop. She squeezed. One target folded backward, the other flinched, dove vanished. For a moment, only the ringing in her ears existed. Then Torres again. We're exfiling East Ravine, can you cover? Lena's throat burned. Go, I'll hold. She ran. Feet pounding rock, lungs clawing for air. The forest closed around her like jaws. Her body moved like machinery, like something she'd borrowed from someone stronger. Roots grabbed her boots. Branches slashed her arms. She didn't feel any of it. All she felt was the weight of their lives, of her promise, of Emma's voice whispering from some unreachable distance. Why do you always have to be the strong one? Because someone had to, because no one had been for her. She skidded into a new perch above the ravine, boots grinding stone to powder. The team's dark shapes flickered below, weaving through the trees, the hostage a pale ghost between them. Something stirred to their left. She saw it through her scope, movement, deliberate hunting. Not one, many. A full fire team, too many. Her gut twisted. They wouldn't make it. Unless she did something she swore she'd never do again. Her finger hovered above the radio trigger. The cold plastic bit her glove. This was supposed to be clean, quiet. A line in, a line out, no noise to echo back to command. That was why they sent her, because she could erase things so completely they seemed like they were never there. But this wouldn't be clean. She toggled the second channel. A static she hadn't touched since her first deployment hissed to life. Artillery support, the kind they weren't supposed to use here. The kind that didn't ask questions before it erased coordinates from the map. Her thumb trembled just once. Then she pressed. Fire mission, she whispered, voice breaking. She rattled off coordinates like they were pieces of her own soul, tearing loose. A pause. Then confirmed. She closed her eyes. Seconds later, the horizon caught fire. The sound came after a rolling, bone-deep roar that flattened the tree line and shredded the air itself. Heat slapped her face even from half a mile away. Trees screamed as they cracked. The earth convulsed. And when the smoke curled back, there was only silence. Too much silence. Her earpiece crackled faintly. Lena, what did you do? Tor's voice small, not angry, just hollow. Kept you alive, she said. It felt like someone else speaking through her mouth. They said nothing more. The team vanished into the forest's black throat. Lena stayed until the smoke thinned to whispers, until the world remembered how to breathe again, until her hands stopped shaking, though they never really did. They reached the extraction point before dawn, a flat patch of earth carved between cliffs, hidden from the sky. The helicopter came as a whisper at first, then a scream, wind howling, rotor blades slicing the night into ribbons. Torres half-carried Ramirez, whose leg was wrapped in a crude tourniquet. His eyes were glassy. He clutched a photo of his kids like a rosary. The hostage shivered, lips blue, shackles still biting his wrists. He kept muttering something under his breath. A name, maybe, or a prayer. Lena walked last, always last, eyes sweeping the trees, the ridges, the sky, waiting for one last shadow, one last mistake. But nothing came. The helicopter lifted them from the earth. The wind howled around her like grief. She didn't look back at the ruins. When they landed at base, the others vanished into med bays, debrief tents, the blur of movement and shouting. Torres brushed her shoulder as he passed, just once. His eyes said thank you, but also I don't want to know. She stood alone on the tarmac. The sky was paling, washed in thin gray light. The air tasted of burnt metal and coming rain. She felt like a ghost wearing her own body. Her hands were still trembling when she reached into her chest pocket and pulled out the folded paper, the letter Emma had written her last year, the one she still hadn't opened. The edges were soft now, worn from every mission. Every night she had almost gathered the courage to read it. She stared at it, then slid it back unopened. Not yet. Sleep wouldn't come. It never did after nights like this. She sat in the corner of her barracks, boots still on, the faint hum of distant generators vibrating through the floor. The base smelled of oil and wet canvas. A storm was coming. She stared at her rifle leaning against the wall, the barrel catching the thin light. And for the first time in months, she let herself whisper the question that had been gnawing at her edges. How many more times can I survive before there's nothing left of me? No answer came. Just the soft groan of wind against the tin roof and the echo of distant thunder rolling closer. Why did the air feel heavier after victory? The base was alive with motion, trucks rumbling over wet gravel, floodlights stabbing through the gray dawn, voices cracking with exhaustion and adrenaline. But Lena moved through it like a ghost. Faces blurred past, uniforms damp from the storm, boots splashing through puddles. No one looked at her. Not really. Maybe they were grateful. Maybe they were afraid. Maybe it was the same thing. Her clothes still smelled of gunpowder and smoke. The stench clung to her skin like regret. Torres caught her eye across the yard as medics wheeled Ramirez into the infirmary. For a second, she thought he might come over, say something, bridge that impossible gap. He didn't. He just nodded once, not a thank you, not forgiveness, just acknowledgement. Then he turned away. Lena stood in the middle of the chaos, rain dripping off the brim of her cap, and wondered if this was what surviving felt like, standing still while the world forgot how to see you. Hours passed in a blur of debriefs, a cramped tent, a table scarred with cigarette burns, officers asking questions they didn't want real answers to. Collateral. Minimal. Hostage condition. Stable. Team casualties. One wounded. Their eyes flickered over her face like moths avoiding flame. No one mentioned the fire mission. No one asked how artillery had landed without approval. Maybe they didn't want to know. Maybe they already did. Lena kept her tone flat, her eyes on the table. They signed the papers, stamped the seals, dismissed her with a nod that meant both congratulations and don't come closer. By the time she stepped back into the open air, the rain had stopped. The clouds sagged low, heavy and bruised. The light felt too bright, too clean. Her boots carried her toward the perimeter fence before she even decided where she was going. The field beyond base stretched in every direction, soaked grass, scattered stones, a thin fog dragging itself along the ground like something wounded. She climbed the fence, dropped into the mud on the far side, and kept walking until the sound of generators faded into nothing. Silence wide and crushing. She sat on a chunk of broken concrete, half swallowed by moss. The rifle across her lap felt heavier than ever. And then she let it happen, the thing she always fought back. Her hands began to shake. At first just her fingers, then her arms, then her chest, as if the tremor was crawling up her ribs from the inside. Her breath came fast, shallow. She bit the inside of her cheek until she tasted copper. Still, the shaking grew. This was the part no one saw, the part she buried so deep she sometimes believed it wasn't real. The part that came after the stillness, after the precision, when her body remembered it was made of flesh and not steel. She folded forward, elbows on her knees, eyes pressed shut. Emma's voice filled the silence, soft, accusing. "You promised you wouldn't disappear like Mom did." Lena had promised, and then she had left anyway. The day the letter came, 3 years ago, with the seal from command and the words that would change everything. She hadn't told Emma why she said yes. She still hadn't told anyone. Her chest ached like something was missing inside it. When the tremors finally ebbed, she opened her eyes and stared at the grass until it blurred. A bird shrieked somewhere above, sharp and distant. It sounded like laughter twisted wrong. Lena pulled the crumpled letter from her pocket again, Emma's letter. The paper was soft from being unfolded and refolded until the creases had become scars. She turned it over in her fingers, feeling its weight, which wasn't much but somehow crushed her anyway. Her thumb slid under the flap, then stopped. If she opened it now, if she read her sister's words, she might break in a way she couldn't patch together again. And she couldn't afford that. Not here. Not yet. She slid it back into her pocket, careful, like it was something alive. Her radio crackled faintly, a ghost of sound. "Lena, report to Hangar 3. She didn't move for a long moment. Then she stood, brushed mud from her knees, and walked back through the fog toward the place that kept swallowing her whole. Hangar 3 was cold and half-dark, the overhead bulbs flickering like they hadn't decided if it was worth staying on. A single black hawk crouched in the center, its rotors sagging low, dripping rainwater like sweat. The major waited beside it. His expression was carved from the same stone as the mountains. No warmth, no anger either. Just that hollow, functional stillness Lena had seen in so many men who'd been at war too long. "Sit," he said, though there was nothing to sit on. She stayed standing. He watched her for a while, like he was trying to decide if she was entirely human or something just wearing the shape of one. Then he said, "You went off book." She didn't answer. "You know what that means?" "Yes." He stepped closer. His boots echoed in the hangar like distant drums. "You saved them. That's the only reason you're not gone already, but don't mistake silence for forgiveness." "I don't," she said quietly. He studied her face, searching for something. "Do you know why Command keeps putting you on these?" he asked. Lena blinked. "Because I don't hesitate." "Wrong," he said, "because you don't ask to come back." The words landed like a blade sliding between her ribs. Clean, quiet, true. The major turned and walked away, his silhouette swallowed by the hangar's shadows. The echo of his boots faded until there was nothing. Lena stood alone with the helicopter and the dripping silence. She didn't remember walking back to the barracks. Time blurred like wet ink. By the time she noticed, she was sitting on her bunk in the dim yellow glow of the single overhead bulb, boots still on, fingers wrapped around her dog tags so tight they dug into her palm. Outside, the storm had come back. Rain battered the tin roof like thrown gravel. Wind howled through the cracks in the siding. The sound filled every hollow space inside her head until it drowned everything else. She stared at the opposite bunk, empty except for a dent in the thin mattress. Ramirez's bunk. He was still in the med bay, still alive. She clung to that fact like it mattered, like it made anything she'd done worth it. The barracks door creaked open. Torres slipped in, damp, tired, his eyes two shadows in the half-light. He hesitated, then sat on the edge of the bunk across from her. They didn't speak for a long time. The rain spoke for them. Then softly he said, "You could have died back there." She shrugged, "So could you." "That's not the same." She looked at him, "Why not?" "Because you're trying," he said. "We're just surviving. You're trying to lose yourself on purpose." The words hung there between them, heavy, fragile. Lena wanted to tell him he was wrong, that she was only doing what had to be done, that duty had nothing to do with wanting, but her throat locked around the lie. Torres sighed, rubbed his face. "Ramirez, he asked if you were okay." That startled her. "Why?" "Because you saved him." She said nothing. Torres stood slow, like someone twice his age. He paused at the door. "You don't have to be the strong one all the time." The door clicked shut behind him. Lena sat in the rain-drowned silence, the words echoing in her skull like distant artillery. You don't have to be the strong one. But if she wasn't, who would be? Sleep never came. She lay on her back, staring at the ceiling, listening to the storm's fingers drum against the metal above her. Hours blurred. Her body floated somewhere between exhaustion and weightlessness. And then the alarm. A shrill metallic wail slicing through the dark. She bolted upright, boots already on the floor before her mind caught up. Red lights strobed in the hallway beyond the barracks, bathing the walls in poolsing blood. Her radio crackled with clipped voices. Incoming convoy compromised. Ambush. Survivors inbound. Her heart lurched. Another mission. No time to reset. No time to breathe. She grabbed her gear, slung her rifle and ran. The storm clawed at her as she burst into the open air. Lightning licked the horizon, illuminating jagged peaks like broken teeth. Rain sheeted down in cold knives. Engines roared in the distance, trucks approaching fast, their headlights flickering through the downpour. Figures stumbled off the lead truck as it screeched to a halt inside the wire. Medics swarmed them, shouting over the storm. Lena caught glimpses through the chaos, torn uniforms, faces smeared with blood and mud, eyes wide and wild. And then she saw her. Not Emma, of course not Emma. But a girl. Barely 20, small, drenched, shaking. Her eyes hollow with the kind of terror you only carry if you've seen death look back at you. Something in Lena cracked. The girl caught her staring just for a moment. Their eyes locked, lightning flashed white between them. Then the girl was swallowed by the medics, gone. Lena stood in the rain until she couldn't feel her fingers, until her heartbeat slowed from thunder to something quieter, something dangerous. And in the silence that followed, a single thought rose, sharp and poisonous. Emma could end up like her. That night, alone in the armory's low light, Lena cleaned her rifle with surgical precision. The storm raged outside, wind howling down the steel corridors, rain hammering like fists. Her hands moved calm, practiced, steady. But her mind was not. Images overlapped the girl's hollow eyes. Ramirez's photo of his kids, Emma's faded sweater, the flash of fire on the ridge. The way silence always came back heavier than the gunfire that birthed it. And behind it all, the same whisper that never stopped. You promised you wouldn't disappear. She tightened the last screw until it squealed. Then she whispered back, so quietly no one but the ghosts could hear. I already have. Why had they chosen her again? The summons came before sunrise, delivered by a runner who didn't meet her eyes. A folded slip, her name scrawled in ink so sharp it looked like it might cut her fingers. She read it under the flickering hallway bulb, the words sinking into her like cold water. Report Operations Wing 500 Solo Assignment. Solo. She stood there for a long moment, the paper softening in her damp grip. The barracks hallway was silent except for the faint hum of generators through the walls. Everyone else was sleeping, breathing, whole. She tucked the slip into her chest pocket, next to Emma's letter, and felt the two papers pressed together like twin ghosts. Then she went. The operations wing was colder than the rest of base. Always was. Concrete walls sweating moisture, overhead lights buzzing like angry hornets. No windows, no clocks, just the heavy, timeless hum of machinery and secrets. She waited outside the briefing room, helmet under her arm, boots dripping rain. The corridor smelled like ozone and bleach. Far away, metal doors slammed in steady rhythm, like distant heartbeats. When the door opened, it was the Major. Of course it was. His face looked carved deeper than it had yesterday, like someone had taken a chisel to stone while he slept. "Come in," he said. Inside, the room was dim and sparse, one map lit by a single overhead lamp. The shadows seemed heavier than the furniture. He didn't sit, neither did she. "This isn't official," he said. His voice was flat but softer than before, like he was trying not to wake something sleeping nearby. "There will be no record of this operation. No comms. No team." Her stomach hollowed. "You'll insert alone," he continued. "Retrieve a package. Burn anything that slows you down." "What kind of package?" His eyes lingered on her just a moment too long. "Human." A silence stretched between them, taut as wire. Then he slid a folder across the table. She opened it. Just one photo. Blurred. A man in civilian clothes, head down, walking under a cracked archway somewhere that looked like war had chewed it down to bones. And beneath the photo, a single line of intel. "Former asset, defected. Contains classified data on civilian operations. Will not come willingly." Her hand tightened on the edge of the folder until the paper crumpled. "Why me?" "Because you won't ask questions," the Major said. Then, almost gently, "and because you don't hesitate." The words burned. She closed the folder. "When?" "Now." The helicopter was waiting by the time she reached the pad, its engine whining in the pre-dawn darkness. Rain slicked the tarmac into black glass. The smell of fuel and iron clung to everything. She strapped her gear down without looking at the crew. They didn't look at her either. She wasn't one of them anymore, not tonight. She was just a shape they were delivering to somewhere no one else wanted to go. The rotors thundered to life. Wind clawed at her clothes. The base shrank behind them, swallowed by fog, until there was only black sky and the steady drone of blades tearing it apart. Lena stared down at the earth blurring below, rivers flashing silver, mountains hunched like broken spines. Her reflection ghosted in the helicopter window, pale, hollow-eyed, a stranger wearing her own face. She reached into her pocket, fingers brushing Emma's letter. She didn't take it out, just pressed her thumb into the paper until it bent. "What would you think of me now, Em?" The thought cut deeper than the wind. They dropped her 20 clicks east of the border, just a smear of mud and rock in the skeletal mountains. No light, no sound. The helicopter rose and vanished before her boots even sank into the soil. Silence fell heavy. She checked her gear by touch. Rifle, sidearm suppressed, 2 days of rations, a small burner charge to erase anything left behind. No comms uplink, no lifeline. She was alone. She started walking. The terrain was knife-edged, every step a gamble. Loose shale crumbled under her boots, clattering down unseen ravines. The wind keened through the peaks like something grieving. Clouds dragged their bellies across the ridges, heavy with unfallen snow. Hours blurred into gray. She kept her breathing shallow, her pace precise. She had done this before. She knew how to become silence, how to disappear until even her shadow forgot her. But her mind wouldn't obey. It kept drifting back to Emma, to the kitchen light flickering on their last night together, to the half-spoken argument that had hung between them like static. "You don't have to go," Emma had said. Her voice had been small, like she was afraid of it breaking. "Yes, I do," Lena had replied and hadn't explained. Because how could she? How could she tell her little sister that she had joined not to fight for a cause, not to serve some flag, but to erase something, to burn out a piece of herself that had grown too dark, too heavy to carry home? She had seen things, done things before the army, things Emma would never forgive. And if Lena couldn't be forgiven, then at least she could be useful. She reached the outskirts of the target village, just as the light began to rot from the sky. It was almost beautiful from a distance, a scattering of stone houses clinging to a slope, their windows glowing faintly like embers in a dying fire. Smoke curled from crumbling chimneys. The air smelled of wet dust and faint wood smoke. But closer it was death. Walls pocked by bullets, doors hanging like broken jaws, silence pressing from every side, too thick, too knowing. She crouched on the ridge, glassed the village through her scope, one figure outside smoking by a rusted truck, civilian clothes, rifle slung lazy on his shoulder, no insignia. The man from the photo, she couldn't tell from this distance. She waited, breathing shallow, muscles wound tight as tripwire. Then behind the houses a sound, faint, fragile. A child laughing. The sound was so small, so human. It cut through her armor like a blade. Her finger froze on the trigger. She scanned again, quick, heart hammering. A girl, tiny, dark hair plastered to her forehead, chasing a battered soccer ball through the mud behind a shattered wall. A woman stood nearby, watching her, arms folded tight against the cold. Civilians still here, still breathing. Lena's throat locked. This wasn't supposed to happen. They had said the place was empty, cleared, dead. It was. She waited until night swallowed the village whole. Then she moved. Silent, low, a shadow between shadows. Rain slicked the stones, muting her footfalls. She slipped through broken doorways, past sagging curtains that fluttered like ghosts. Every creak sounded like a scream in her skull. She found him in the third house, the man from the photo. Older than she'd expected, beard thick, streaked with gray, eyes sharp even in half-light. He sat at a table under a flickering bulb, typing on a battered laptop, papers scattered around like dried leaves. He didn't look like a traitor. He looked like someone trying very hard to disappear. Lena stood in the doorway for a long moment, the sight of him wrapping cold fingers around her lungs. She raised her sidearm. "Step away from the table." He froze, slowly turned. His eyes met hers. And everything cracked. Because for a second, just a second, she saw Emma's eyes instead. That same startled defiance. That same fragile, desperate fire. Her grip faltered. "Please," he said quietly, voice frayed but steady. "I can't go back, you don't understand." Her heartbeat roared in her ears. "Move," she said. "You think they want me alive for what I know." His mouth twisted, not quite a smile. "They won't let me speak. They'll erase me." "That's not my problem." "Yes," he said, "it is, because they'll erase you too one day just like me." Her finger trembled. He saw it, he softened. "You're tired," he whispered. "I can see it. Whatever you think you're fighting for, it's killing you." Lena's breath hitched like she'd been struck. She wanted to end it, drag him out, finish the mission, be the machine they needed. But she couldn't make her hand move. Because he was right. A floorboard creaked behind her. She spun, weapon snapping up. The little girl stood in the doorway, barefoot in the cold, her eyes wide and round in the half-light. The soccer ball tucked under her arm. Mud streaked her knees. She looked between them, the gun, the man, Lena's face. Then she whispered something Lena couldn't understand. and smiled. It was the smallest thing, but it shattered her. Lena lowered the weapon. Her arm felt like it weighed 100 pounds. Her chest felt hollowed out, raw, burning from the inside. "Go," she whispered to the man. He blinked. "What?" "Take her leave now." His mouth opened, closed. Something like hope flickered across his face, thin and dangerous. He grabbed a satchel, scooped the child into his arms. She wrapped her arms around his neck, giggling softly, unafraid. At the threshold, he paused. "Why are you helping me?" Lena's voice was barely breath. "Because she reminds me of someone I still have a chance to save." Then they were gone, swallowed by the rain and the broken dark. Lena stayed in the doorway long after they disappeared, the cold creeping into her bones. The bulb above her flickered and died. The silence pressed in like water. The mission was over, and she had failed it on purpose. Her hands were trembling again, harder than before. But somewhere underneath the terror, the guilt, the hollow ache in her chest, something else stirred. Not peace, but the faintest ember of something she thought she'd lost forever. "Joyce, where do you go when the people chasing you know all the places you've ever hidden?" Lena asked herself that as she stood alone in the ruins, her boots sinking into wet ash. The village lay in silence around her, its cracked walls hunched under the weight of years and secrets. Rain whispered through the broken roofs, dripping into the empty rooms like the ticking of unseen clocks. The man and the child were gone. The night had swallowed them. And command would know soon enough that she had let them slip through her hands. She could almost feel it, the invisible thread that had always bound her to the Major's cold voice, tightening from miles away. It would snap soon. Then they would send someone else, someone who didn't hesitate. Her thumb found the folded paper in her pocket, Emma's letter. Damp now, edges worn soft from all the times she'd touched it without reading. She pressed it there for a moment like it might anchor her to something human. Then she moved. The path out of the village clung to the cliffside like a scar. The rocks were slick, every step a quiet negotiation with gravity. Lena kept her breath shallow, her body low, listening to the night. She had erased her own tracks as she went, brushing them out with the heel of her hand, scattering gravel behind her like broken promises. It wouldn't matter. They would still find her. They always did. But she had bought the man time. Maybe enough. 2 hours later, she reached the ridge. The wind howled here, tearing at her jacket, carrying the smell of wet stone and burned fuel from the valley below. She stopped, crouched low, glassed the horizon through her scope. There, a flicker of movement, far to the west, just at the tree line, two small shapes trudging through the darkness, the man's hunched silhouette, the child clinging to his side. Alive, moving, free. She lowered the scope, closed her eyes. Then something cracked behind her. Not a twig, not an animal, metal. Her whole body locked. She rolled sideways an instant before the bullet hissed through where her head had been, smashing into rock with a sound like bones breaking. Adrenaline slammed into her veins like fire. She dove behind a jagged outcrop, mud splashing against her visor, breath tearing at her throat. Another shot, closer. Sparks exploded off the stone inches from her cheek. They were here. Her own people. Silence stretched, taut and sharp. She could hear them now, faint crunch of boots on rock, the soft chime of gear shifting, distant, closing, precision, training, ghosts in the dark. Her earpiece crackled. She'd forgotten it was still tuned to their net. A voice slid through the static, calm, clinical. "Target has broken protocol. Orders are black. Confirm kill." Her chest caved in around the words. Not capture, not bring her back. Erase her. Her pulse thundered in her skull. She pressed flat to the stone, the rain running cold under her collar, every muscle screaming to move. But she forced herself still, invisible. She had trained for this, to be the unseen thing in the night. Now she would have to use that training against the hands that gave it to her. She waited until the wind surged, ripping across the ridge, howling loud enough to swallow sound. Then she moved. Fast, low, silent. Her boots skimmed the rocks, her breath a ghost in her mask. She slid downslope, weaving between boulders, vanishing in their shadowed jaws. A flash of a visor beam swept overhead just behind her. Too close. She ducked into a narrow cleft, pressed herself into the stone. The smell of lichen and cold iron filled her nose. She could feel her heart pounding in her teeth. One of them passed within arm's reach. She saw the faint glow of their optics, the slow, patient swing of their rifle. Their movements were perfect, flawless, like hers used to be. She let them go by. Then she slipped the other way. She kept moving until her legs shook from the cold and exhaustion, until her breath was knives and her fingers felt carved from ice. The night stretched on forever, black and endless, the stars like silent holes punched in the dark. By dawn she had reached the river. It cut through the gorge like a wound, swollen from the rains, churning white and vicious. Mist curled off its surface like steam from something angry. The roar swallowed all other sound. Perfect. She stripped her outer layer, sealed her gear in the waterproof bag, and slid into the current. The cold was instant, crushing, like hands closing around her lungs. She didn't fight it. Fighting would make noise. Noise would mean death. She let it take her. By the time she crawled out 2 kilometers downstream, the sun had clawed its way above the peaks. Her teeth rattled like loose shells. Mud clung to her face, her hair, her bones. She lay there for a long time on the riverbank, shaking, staring up at the colorless sky. The world spun. Her heart felt distant, like it belonged to someone else. Then she sat up, slowly, carefully. Her hands were bleeding. She hadn't noticed when it happened. Cuts from the rocks. The water had washed them clean, but the skin was torn, raw, fragile. Just like her. She sat there a long time, watching the blood bead and vanish, thinking about what it meant to survive something you weren't meant to walk away from. And why she always did. When she could stand again, she went inland, south, away from the known routes, away from the net they would tighten behind her. She didn't know where she was going. She only knew she couldn't stop. By nightfall, she reached the ruins. She didn't know what the place had been once, maybe a monastery, maybe a fortress. The walls were little more than broken ribs rising from the earth, draped in moss and silence. Owls nested in the cracked arches, their eyes glowing faintly in the dark. She made a small fire in the hollow of a fallen column, not enough to be seen, just enough to thaw the stiffness from her fingers. The flames whispered and danced, casting her shadow huge and thin across the stone. She sat there, knees drawn to her chest, and finally, pulled out Emma's letter. Her hands shook as she opened it. The paper was creased and soft, the ink smudged from her sweat and rain. Emma's handwriting was small and round, still carrying the clumsy warmth of someone who never meant to be read by soldiers. Lena, I don't know if this will find you. I don't know where you are. I just wanted to say I'm proud of you. Even if you don't come home, even if you think you're too far gone, you're still my sister, and I still love you. Please don't disappear. Lena's breath caught on the last line. She stared at the words until they blurred, until they became just shapes, until the fire died down to a whisper of coals and the owls had gone quiet. Then she folded the letter back up, pressed it to her heart like it could keep her alive. Sometime near dawn, a sound woke her. Soft, distant, whirring. Her eyes snapped open. Her hand found her rifle before she was fully upright. A drone high searching. Its faint hum passed overhead like a metal insect, scanning the ruins with invisible eyes. A flash of red from its underbelly swept the broken stones. Lena froze. The beam paused, hovered, then moved on. She stayed still long after the sound faded, breathing shallow, listening to the silence settle like dust. Then she whispered to no one, "They're not going to stop." And for the first time, the thought didn't hollow her. It hardened her. She doused the fire, buried the coals, packed her gear. She had one mission now. Not survival, not escape. Redemption. Not for them, not for the man, not even for the child. For Emma, for the promise in her letter, for the version of herself that had once believed she could be more than a weapon. She would become untraceable. She would vanish on purpose. But not to disappear. To return. And far above, beyond the gray peaks, the first surveillance satellite passed overhead, its lens sweeping the ruins below, hunting for a ghost who had stopped running. What if they never meant for her to come back? The thought haunted her as she moved through the mountains like a wraith. No trails now, no lights, no landmarks, just the cold stone under her boots and the hollow rhythm of her breath. Every step felt borrowed, every heartbeat stolen. They would expect her to flee, to hide, to run as far and fast as possible until she bled out of the world. So she did the opposite. She went back. The supply outpost squatted at the foot of the northern pass like a wounded animal, low, gray, all sharp corners and muted lights. She had passed through it months ago on her way out to some other mission she could no longer remember, just another blurred fragment of obedience. She remembered its smell: cold iron, damp wool, bitter coffee. It hadn't changed. The guards didn't expect trouble here. No one ever came back from the border without orders. Especially not alone. Lena watched them through her scope from the tree line, steady and patient. Two men at the gate, shoulders slumped with fatigue, rifles slung loose. Inside, through the windows, she saw a skeleton crew, logistics officers, paper shufflers, people who thought the war existed somewhere far away from their desks. They didn't know they were already part of it. She waited for the wind to rise, carrying the soft hiss of pine needles. Then she slipped down the slope like falling snow. She breached the perimeter through the drainage ditch, a narrow, rusted tunnel that reeked of mold and old oil. She crawled on her belly, the cold metal biting through her clothes, her rifle scraping stone in silence. She emerged inside the fence line, dripping mud unseen. Inside, everything was still. Fluorescent light hummed. The air tasted stale, like paper that had forgotten sunlight. She didn't draw her weapon. She wasn't here to kill them. She was here to learn why they wanted her erased. She found the server room in the back of the admin block, behind a door marked authorized personnel only. The lock was primitive. She bypassed it in seconds. The air inside was cold and sharp, humming with the quiet heartbeat of machines. Rows of black towers blinked red and green in the dimness like the eyes of something sleeping. She sat at a terminal, plugged in the cracked data key she had carried hidden in her boot since her first deployment. It was a relic, old tech, obsolete, untraceable, like her. She started pulling files. At first it was just numbers, movements, requisitions, casualty spreadsheets stacked like gravestones. Then she found it, her own name. Lena Marrow, classified personnel dossier. Her breath caught, she opened it. And the world tilted. Her record wasn't what she remembered. There were gaps, blank months where she had been somewhere but nothing was listed, missions unlogged, casualties marked collateral with no details, and at the end, in cold black text, designated expendable, psychological profile, controlled dissociative response, mission suitability, extreme. Expendable. Like equipment. Like she was never meant to come back at all, just burn out somewhere unseen, taking secrets with her. Her vision swam. She gripped the edge of the desk until her knuckles went white. Her pulse pounded in her throat. Then she scrolled further. There, the defector's file. NILSKADEN, former intelligence operative. Access, Civilian Oversight Committee archives. Status, compromised. Termination authorized. Civilian oversight. Lena froze. That committee didn't exist anymore. Not officially. It had been dissolved after they questioned the ethics of the civilian strike program. After they started asking why so many unlisted missions left behind villages filled with corpses. Her missions. They had erased the committee, but not before Keaton escaped with proof. And now they wanted him dead, because if he spoke, if he showed the world what he had, their war would unravel. And they had sent her, because she was already broken enough to do it without asking why. Her stomach turned to ice. A sound behind her. Soft, measured. She spun. A young supply officer stood in the doorway, holding a mug of coffee. His eyes went wide at the sight of her. The mud-streaked figure crouched in the dark, weapon slung, face hollowed by exhaustion and firelight from the screens. "Sergeant Marrow," he said, unsure, afraid. Lena's heart slammed. Her finger hovered over the trigger. He didn't move, just stood there, coffee trembling in his hand. "My brother," he blurted suddenly, voice shaking. "He was on your recon team. Daz, he didn't come back. They said you were the last one to see him." The name hit like a thrown stone. She remembered Daz. Quiet, nervous laugh. Used to hum under his breath when he was scared. A boy wearing a man's uniform. She had watched him bleed out under gray dawn light, his hands clutched around her sleeve like he was asking her to take him home. She hadn't. She left him in the dirt because the mission clock hadn't stopped ticking. "I'm sorry," she whispered. The officer blinked. His lip trembled. Then he nodded once, like something inside him had cracked and he was holding the pieces together with sheer will. Are you running?" he asked. "No," she said softly, "not anymore." For a moment they just stood there, two ghosts of the same machine, caught in each other's gravity. Then he stepped aside. "I didn't see you," he said. And left. Lena exhaled like it hurt. She wiped the terminal clean, yanked the key, and ghosted back into the night before anyone else saw her. She moved through the mountains for 3 days, silent and alone, living on cold rations and melted snow, always one step ahead of the sweep teams closing the net. Drones buzzed distant overhead. Patrols combed the valleys. Every night she watched their flashlights crawl the ridgelines like hungry insects. They weren't searching for a deserter anymore. They were hunting a liability. And she would give them something else instead. On the 4th night, she reached an abandoned relay station perched on the cliff like a black tooth. Rusted dishes sagged overhead, half swallowed by creeping moss. The air reeked of wet stone and forgotten electricity. She set up her gear in the hollowed-out control room, old cables coiling at her feet, wind howling through shattered glass. She decrypted Keaton's last known data burst from the files she stole. Embedded coordinates, encrypted schematics, a list of names she recognized, people she had seen in briefing rooms, in clean uniforms, smiling thinly as they condemned places she had later walked through as ash. It wasn't just about Keaton. It was about the system that had built her and then marked her as disposable. She stared at the map glowing on her cracked screen. Her hands were steady now, her heartbeat calm. She wasn't running anymore. She was going to burn them from the inside. That night, as the wind clawed at the relay station, Lena dreamed of Emma. Not as she had last seen her, standing small in the kitchen light begging her to stay. But younger, 8 years old, sitting on their old porch steps in summer sunlight, bare feet swinging, laughing at something Lena couldn't hear. She woke with tears dried on her face and the smell of smoke in her hair. She didn't want to be a ghost anymore. She wanted to be someone Emma could still recognize. So she wrote. Not to command, not to Keaton. To Emma. She found an old paper logbook in the wreckage. tore out a blank sheet, and scrawled in block letters with her shaking hand. I don't know what I am anymore, but I know what I won't be. If I don't make it back, please remember me as more than what they turned me into. I am coming home, one way or another. She folded the page, slipped it next to Emma's letter in her chest pocket, two ghosts side by side, warm against her heart. Then she shouldered her rifle and set out into the gray, broken dawn. Not as their weapon, as their reckoning. How do you fight something that lives in the dark when you were made to live there too? The question stalked her as she descended through the shattered canyons like a shadow slipping free of its body. The air was sharp and metallic this low, heavy with mist that curled in thin fingers across the stone. Drones hummed distant above the clouds, sweeping their cold eyes across the earth. She stayed beneath them, always just beyond their reach, ghosting from ridge to ridge like smoke. For days, she hunted what had once hunted her. The relay station's stolen data led her to an old listening post buried in the cliffs above the eastern basin, a black site no map admitted existed. Officially, it was marked as uninhabited Zone 14 on the few charts she had found, a scar on paper, a place no one was supposed to ask about. But it was alive. Through her scope from the shadowed ridge above, she saw it breathing, dim lights pulsing like veins, trucks crawling through its narrow gate, armed silhouettes packing its razor wire perimeter. Antennas stabbed at the sky like broken spines. Wind keened low through the ravines, carrying the faint metallic tang of electricity. This was where they hid the past. This was where they hid her. She lay prone for hours, glassing the place, memorizing patterns. Two roving patrols, one sniper on the watchtower, careless, shifting his weight every 5 minutes. Security rotations at the gate every hour on the hour. And near the center, under a corrugated awning, a satellite uplink dish big enough to pull whispers from space. Perfect. Lena's hands didn't shake anymore. They felt carved from something older than bone. She slid back from the ridge, melted into the rocks, and began the long, silent descent. Night swallowed the basin whole before she reached the wire. Rain drifted down in thin silver strands, muffling her movements, blurring the edges of everything. She moved low, her breath shallow under her mask, each step slow enough to merge with the wind. At the perimeter, she clipped the fence with cold precision, cutting a silent seam through the metal. Her heart beat slow, deliberate, a drum buried deep in the dark. She slipped inside. The ground squelched beneath her boots, soft with old mud. Generators hummed somewhere distant. A dog barked once, sharp and echoing, then went quiet. She ghosted between stacks of crates, past the tower where the sniper now leaned with his head nodding, bored. Past the barracks where shadows moved behind thin curtains, men laughing, a tinny radio humming static-laced music. So human, so fragile. She kept going. At the uplink dish, she crouched in its shadow, the rain sliding down its rust-streaked frame like tears. The control panel sat in a small shack beside it, yellow light seeping under the door. She cracked the lock, slipped inside. The air smelled of ozone and wet dust. Ancient servers lined the walls, blinking like tired eyes. She sat at the terminal, plugged in her drive, and began. Lines of code crawled across the screen. Her pulse stayed steady. She wasn't stealing data this time. She was giving it back. Every classified file she had pulled from the supply outpost, every redacted dossier, every photograph of places erased from maps, of people marked as collateral damage, of missions stamped CLEARED that had left nothing alive behind. She pushed it all through the uplink, straight into the satellite feed. Straight into the world. Somewhere out there, Keaton would see it. Somewhere people would know. Maybe they would bury it. Maybe they would pretend it didn't matter. Maybe nothing would change. But someone would remember. And that was enough. She was halfway through the upload when the alarm tripped. A shriek of sirens tore the air in half. Red lights exploded across the compound. The dish shuddered as it powered down, its great frame whining like an injured animal. The terminal screamed breach DETECTED in flashing white text. Lena ripped the drive free. Outside, boots thundered. She slipped out the back just as the door burst open behind her, voices barking, flashlights cutting through the rain. She ran. The world narrowed to sound and motion. Her boots hammered the mud, water spraying off her legs. Bullets hissed past, sparking off metal. Searchlights swept the yard like giant white knives. She vaulted a crate, slid under coiled wire, ducked into the shadow of a truck as gunfire tore the air above her. Her lungs were fire. Her vision tunneled. A shape loomed ahead, the guard tower. And at its base, as if the world had folded in on itself, stood the major. Waiting. He looked exactly as she remembered, still, stone-eyed, rain slicking his hair into hard lines, the floodlights caught in his pupils, hollowing them into dark glass. For a moment, they just stared at each other through the chaos. Then he spoke, and his voice cut through everything. I told them you'd come back. Lena's chest felt like it might crack. You sent me to disappear, she said. I sent you to prove what you were, he replied. No emotion, just cold truth. And you did. Her hands trembled on her rifle, not from fear, from something older, something that had lived inside her for years like a buried mine, waiting. You made me a ghost, she whispered. You were a ghost, he said. I just gave you permission. Rain ran down her face. She didn't know if she was shaking or if the world was. Why Keaton? She asked. His jaw flexed, a muscle flickered in his cheek. Because he wanted to end it, he said, and endings are dangerous. Endings are human. No, he said, stepping closer, they're weak. The floodlights swung across them, casting their shadows long and broken across the mud. Sirens wailed, shouts echoed. The compound roared with chaos around their small stillness. You think this makes you righteous? He asked. Leaking our files. Do you know what happens when you let civilians see what war really costs? They flinch. They close their eyes. They stop sending people like you. Good, she said. Something flickered in his expression. Just for a second, not doubt, something thinner, older, regret maybe. Do you think I wanted to make you like this? He said quietly. You think I didn't see what it did to you? She swallowed something sharp in her throat. Then why? Because you were the only one who survived, he said. And for a moment, in the sirens and the rain, he looked unbearably tired, like the weight of every name they had erased was carved into his shoulders. I don't want to survive anymore, she said. Then stop, he whispered. Time fractured. For a breath, neither of them moved. The sirens screamed. The lights flared. The world held its breath between them. Then Lena raised her rifle. And dropped it. It hit the mud with a soft, final thud. The major's eyes widened. I'm done killing for you, she said. And turned her back on him. Shouts rose behind her. The tower gun swiveled. A shot cracked, deafening. Pain ripped through her shoulder like white fire. She stumbled, dropped to one knee, mud splashing. Breath gone, vision spinning. The major barked something sharp, commanding, and the gun fell silent. The shouting stopped. Lena pushed herself upright. Her arm hung dead at her side, blood soaking her sleeve, warm in the cold rain. She faced him one last time. I wasn't made to disappear, she said. I was made to choose. Then she limped into the night. And no one followed. She didn't stop until the basin was a blur behind her and the mountains rose ahead like black teeth against the storm. The wound burned. Her legs shook. She didn't care. Somewhere out there, the files were already breaking free. Somewhere, people were seeing the truth. Somewhere, Emma was still waiting. And Lena was still alive. For now, that was enough. How far can someone walk on willpower alone? Lena asked herself that as she limped through the teeth of the mountains, one arm clamped to her shoulder, her breath tearing ragged in the thin air. The wound burned like molten iron. Her vision narrowed at the edges, dark and soft. The world swayed under her boots. She didn't stop. She couldn't. If she stopped, she wasn't sure she'd get up again. The clouds dragged low overhead, swollen and gray. Rain smeared the horizon into watercolor smudges. The wind roared through the passes like the voice of something ancient and tired. She pushed into it anyway, head bowed, step after broken step. The files were gone now, scattered into the world. She had seen the uplink confirm before the alarm screamed, before the world exploded around her. Even if they shut it down halfway, enough had gone through to spark questions, enough to light a fuse. The machine would try to bury it, but it could never unlight that spark. And she had no more war left to give them. By the second night, the fever came. It crawled into her bones like fire and ice. Her skin burned. Her teeth chattered. The wound throbbed with every heartbeat, a slow drumbeat echoing in her skull. She found a hollow under a leaning boulder and collapsed inside it, shaking, tasting metal on her tongue. Dreams came hard and sharp. The faces of the ones she'd left behind. Daz with his quiet laugh. The little girl with the soccer ball, her smile small and fearless. Keaton vanishing into the trees. The Major standing still as stone while the storm howled. And Emma, always Emma, sitting on the porch steps again, barefoot in the sun, looking up at her with that soft, stubborn light in her eyes. Lena reached for her and woke with a cry torn raw from her throat. Morning came gray and heavy. The fever had broken, but she felt hollow, scraped clean. Her body was just ache and bone and will. The mountains loomed pale and endless. She stood and kept going. On the fourth day, she saw the valley. It opened below her like a forgotten dream, green, soft, spilling with sunlight. The snowline ended at its rim, and beyond it lay fields, a river curling silver through the grass, scattered rooftops catching the light like quiet promises. Home, or close enough. Her legs nearly buckled at the sight of it. She made herself keep moving. The village came into view by dusk. Wood smoke curled from stone chimneys. Dogs barked somewhere distant. The air was thick with the smell of wet soil and baking bread, so gentle it made her throat ache. No uniforms here, no sirens, no guns, just the quiet hum of life that didn't need her. She skirted the edge of town, keeping to the hedgerows, watching from the long grass. Old habit, muscle memory. The shadows had been her skin for so long. But then she saw it. The porch. The same cracked boards. The same crooked wind chime, still catching the breeze in broken little notes. The same flower pots Emma had once tried to keep alive, half-toppled but stubbornly sprouting green again. Her breath caught like a fist in her chest. She had imagined this moment so many times on deployment nights, in desert heat and mountain cold and city ruins, clutching Emma's letter like it could anchor her to who she used to be. But imagining it was safe. Standing here was not. Because what if she was too far gone now? What if Emma saw her and only saw the machine they'd made? Her feet rooted to the soil, her heart hammered. Then the door opened. Emma stepped out barefoot, hair loose, an old cardigan pulled tight around her shoulders. She looked smaller than Lena remembered, softer, but her eyes were the same. They found Lena instantly, as if they'd been waiting there on the porch for years, scanning the horizon. They widened. Her lips parted. Elena. The sound of her name in that voice cracked something inside her that had been solid for so long. Her legs gave out. She sank to her knees in the grass, mud soaking her fatigues, the world spinning. Her breath came in sharp, wet bursts, her vision blurred. Emma was running, The wind chime clattered wildly, her bare feet slapped the dirt. Then she was there, kneeling in the mud, hands on Lena's face. Oh my God, her voice became pieces. You're burning up, her fingers brushed the blood stiff in Lena's jacket. What did they do to you? Lena tried to speak, but all that came out was a broken sound. Emma wrapped her arms around her. Lena folded into her like something collapsing, something breaking open. Her sister's heartbeat thudded against her cheek, warm and real and fast. She hadn't realized how cold she had been until that moment. They stayed there a long time, kneeling in the grass at the edge of the world, the wind weaving their hair together. Eventually, Emma pulled back, brushing mud from Lena's face, her hands trembling. I thought you were dead, she whispered. I was, Lena said, voice hoarse, but I came back. Emma's eyes filled, spilling soft and silent down her cheeks. You don't have to explain. I do, Lena rasped. I need you to know I wasn't fighting for them, not at the end. Emma shook her head. You don't have to be anything for me. I want to be, Lena said. The words felt like glass and sunlight in her throat. Just me. Emma smiled through her tears. Then start here. And somehow Lena smiled back. Small, fragile, real. The sun slipped behind the hills, painting the sky in soft bruises of orange and violet. Crickets started their low, steady song. The wind settled, gentle for the first time in years. Emma helped her up, one arm around her shoulders, and they walked slowly back toward the porch. The boards creaked under their weight. The wind chime whispered. Inside, the air smelled of tea and dust and something sweet in the oven. A single lamp glowed in the corner, warm as breath. Lena stood there in the doorway, boots dripping on the old rug, heart pounding. Then she stepped inside. Later, after Emma cleaned the wound and wrapped her shoulder in soft gauze, after they sat in silence for what felt like hours, Lena pulled the 2 letters from her pocket. Emma's old one, faded and worn, and her own, written in a dead relay station under a broken roof. She handed them both to Emma without a word. Emma read hers first, then Lena's. Her fingers shook on the paper. Then she looked up, eyes shining. You're home, she whispered. And for the first time, Lena let herself believe it. They stayed up late, saying little. The radio hummed low. The world outside hushed itself. At some point, Lena rose, walked to the back door, and stepped out into the cool night air. The fields lay dark and endless. Fireflies blinked in slow pulses over the tall grass, like distant signals fading into stars. She stood there barefoot, the boards cool under her feet, the wind soft on her face. Behind her, Emma's quiet laughter floated from the kitchen like something delicate that might break if touched. Lena closed her eyes. For the first time in years, the silence didn't feel like an enemy. It felt like peace. Somewhere far away, the machine she had escaped would still be searching, still grinding, still pretending it hadn't lost its best ghost. But that no longer mattered, because she wasn't theirs anymore. She was Emma's. She was hers. She stayed there until the last firefly went dark. And when she finally stepped back inside, she whispered, maybe to Emma, maybe to herself. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts. Then she closed the door, and the night took her shadow.